Walk into any car dealership in America today, and you have a choice. You can buy a Dodge, a Ram, a Jeep, a Chrysler, a Maserati, an Alfa Romeo, or a Fiat. You can buy a Peugeot in Paris, a Vauxhall in Birmingham, an Opel in Berlin, a Citroën in Madrid. 14 different badges, 14 different promises, 14 different stories about heritage, identity, and passion. Every single one of them is a lie, because behind every one of those badges sits one company, one board, one obsession. Not with cars, not with legacy, not with the people who tattooed these logos on their skin or saved for years to park one in their driveway. The obsession was margins. The company is Stellantis, and what they did to those 14 brands in 4 years is one of the most destructive corporate experiments in modern automotive history. January 16th, 2021. Two automotive giants shake hands and the world's fourth largest automaker is born overnight. On one side, Fiat Chrysler Automobiles is the Italian-American powerhouse behind Jeep, Dodge, Ram, and Maserati. On the other hand, PSA Group, the French conglomerate that owns Peugeot, Citroën, Opel, and Vauxhall. Together they promised a new era, shared technology, shared platforms, pooled resources to survive the electric revolution, without any single brand carrying the full cost of the transition alone. The pitch was logical. The automotive world was changing fast. Battery technology was expensive. Regulatory pressure was mounting on both sides of the Atlantic. Two mid-sized conglomerates, each fighting separately, made far less sense than one giant fighting together. The new CEO was Carlos Tavares, the man who had already turned PSA Group from near bankruptcy into one of the most profitable car companies in Europe. His track record was extraordinary. His reputation was built on doing more with less, squeezing waste out of supply chains and generating margin where no one thought margin existed. The markets cheered, analysts applauded, shareholders celebrated an annual synergy target of €5 billion. Nobody asked what the brands themselves would cost. Carlos Tavares was not a car romantic. He was a financial surgeon, trained under Carlos Ghosn at Nissan, a man famous for his own ruthless transformation of a failing Japanese giant. Tavares took those lessons and sharpened them to a point. At PSA, his philosophy worked. He cut €8.4 billion in costs from the FCA-PSA merger alone, according to company filings. He reduced headcount by 15.5%, or roughly 47,500 employees, between 2019 and the end of 2023. He pushed profit margins into double digits at a time when most automakers were struggling to hit 6%. In 2023, Tavares earned a salary of €36.5 million, a figure that shareholders actually approved by a majority. His tool was standardization. He believed that car buyers bought specifications and price points, not stories. That a Jeep and a Citroën could share the same bones underneath without anyone noticing or caring. That belief would cost the company everything. If this story is making you rethink what you know about the car industry, subscribe and stay with me, because the next chapter is where it gets personal. Dodge was never just a car brand. For its customers, it was an identity. The Hemi V8, that thundering 5.7-litre engine, was the sound of American muscle, the engine that brought people through showroom doors and kept them loyal for decades. Dodge dealers will tell you the Hemi was not a feature. It was the reason. In 2023, under Tavares, Stellantis discontinued the iconic Charger and Challenger, with their combustion engines entirely. The Hemi was gone. The replacement was the Dodge Charger Daytona, an electric muscle car that sold so poorly that Stellantis had to pivot within a year and bring back a petrol version. Insiders at Stellantis told CNBC that engineers, marketers, and North American executives all pushed back against the Hemi decision. Tavares, they said, would not hear it. He saw the engine as an emissions liability and a cost burden. One dealer summed it up plainly. The Hemi was a selling point. It brought people into showrooms. Customers did not want a turbocharged six-cylinder as a replacement for a roaring V8. Dodge sales in 2024 collapsed by 29%. By Q3 of that year, the brand had sold just 26,559 vehicles in a single quarter. The Charger and Challenger, once moving hundreds of thousands of units annually, were gone. The customers did not quietly accept the substitution. They simply stopped buying. Jeep was the crown jewel, the one brand in the Stellantis empire with genuine global power, genuine off-road credibility, and a name that people across every continent recognized. Tavares saw that equity and decided to monetize it to its absolute limit. Prices were pushed skyward. The Grand Wagoneer, Jeep's flagship, topped out at over $120,000. The brand chased luxury buyers it had never historically owned, loading vehicles with 7 individual screens and features that most of its core customers neither wanted nor needed. Entry-level options were eliminated. The affordable Jeep, the one that had made the brand a cultural institution, became increasingly hard to find. The result was predictable. Customers who had bought Jeeps for 20 years looked at the price tags and walked onto competitor lots. Dealerships sat on bloated inventory they could not clear. By October 2024, Ram dealers alone were carrying a 142-day supply of unsold trucks, more than double what the industry considers healthy. Jeep Grand Cherokee sales dropped 12% in 2024. The Gladiator plummeted 24%. Out of 23 models topping the leftover unsold inventory list, across American dealerships, 12 belonged to Stellantis. Jeep, Dodge and Alfa Romeo sat at the top of that list with no buyers in sight. Tavares described it publicly as a quality problem. His own dealers had a different word for it. While the world watched Jeep and Dodge stumble, something quieter and more brutal was happening to the brands no one was watching. Chrysler, a name with a century of American automotive history, was reduced to selling a single model, the Pacifica minivan. One model. For a brand that once competed directly with Ford and General Motors across every segment. Chrysler deliveries in Q3 2024 fell 47% to just 22,482 vehicles. Lancia, a brand with an extraordinary motorsport heritage and a place in European automotive culture that no spreadsheet can fully quantify, was handed a single rebadged product and left to survive in Italy alone. Maserati, which Stellantis had repackaged using Alfa Romeo's underlying engineering before applying luxury pricing, the market refused to accept, sold 11,127 vehicles globally in 2024. That was down from 26,689 vehicles in 2023, a 58% collapse in 2 years. Tavares told reporters at the 2024 Paris Motor Show that Maserati's problem was marketing, not product. By mid-2024, the brand had already posted an adjusted operating loss of $89 million for the year. These were not struggling startups. These were brands with decades of earned loyalty. Stellantis did not kill them with a single decision. It starved them slowly, one cancelled product plan at a time, until there was nothing left to sell. The strategy that was supposed to save Stellantis money became the reason customers stopped caring about its products. Shared platforms are not inherently wrong. Volkswagen built the Golf platform under dozens of different vehicles successfully for decades. But Volkswagen understood the rule. Shared underpinnings work when brands are allowed to express genuinely different characters above them. Tavares missed that distinction entirely. The danger, as Volkswagen had learned much earlier, is that when every car across a portfolio shares the same engineering, all the personality gets squeezed out and brands lose the ability to differentiate. Stellantis forced a rugged American off-road SUV, a performance Italian saloon, and a French family hatchback onto identical or near-identical foundations. The result was vehicles that felt generic because they were generic. A Jeep should drive like nothing else on earth. An Alfa Romeo should feel like a reward for choosing it. Neither promise survived the standardization process. Customers felt the difference even when they could not name it. They sat in showrooms, put their hands on the wheel, and drove away in something that felt assembled rather than crafted. The platform trap also delayed model launches. Electrical system problems caused multiple vehicles to miss their market windows. By the time some models arrived, the competition had moved on. By the final months of 2024, the numbers were no longer a warning. They were a verdict. North American revenue collapsed 48% in the first half of the year alone. Full-year profits dropped 70%, with net income falling from €18.6 billion in 2023 to just €5.5 billion. The operating margin went from 12.8% to 5.5%. In the second half of 2024, it hit 0.3%. On December 1st, 2024, the board accepted Carlos Tavares' resignation with immediate effect. He had been scheduled to stay until early 2026. His exit was described as the result of different views between the CEO and the board. He walked away with a €23.1 million compensation package that shareholders approved despite fierce opposition from major institutional investors. Then came 2025. The new CEO, Antonio Filosa, initiated write-downs totaling €22.2 billion, largely linked to failed electric vehicle investments. The full-year loss came in at €22 billion on revenues of €154 billion. The United States market share fell to 7.6%, placing Stellantis behind GM, Toyota, Ford, Hyundai Kia, and even Honda. A company that was posting record profits in 2023 had, in 2 years, become the most dramatic cautionary tale in the modern automotive industry. Before the quarterly reports confirmed what everyone suspected, the dealers knew. They always know first. The US Stellantis National Dealer Council sent an open letter directly to Carlos Tavares describing the situation as a disaster. The letter held the CEO responsible for the rapid degradation of Jeep, Chrysler, Ram, and Dodge. The letter did not mince its language. It accused Stellantis of slashing market share nearly in half, of driving down stock prices, of closing plants, of triggering investor lawsuits, supplier lawsuits, and strikes. It described the dealer network itself as having been left in an anemic and diminished state. Reuters reported that under Tavares, the company had sought high margins through a combination of cost-cutting and price hikes that sparked a customer exodus. Some dealers did not write letters. They filed lawsuits. Others attempted to return inventory to the manufacturer, prompting Stellantis to take legal action against dealers trying to exit the franchise. The relationship between automaker and retail partner, normally one of the most stable arrangements in the industry, had completely broken down. These were not anonymous complaints on an internet forum. These were business people who had invested millions of dollars in Stellantis franchises, who had built their livelihoods around these brands, and who were watching everything evaporate because of decisions made in Amsterdam boardrooms by executives who had never spent a day selling cars to real customers. Stellantis is still alive. Filosa is cutting brands, resetting strategy, and trying to rebuild trust with a dealer network that watched the company burn their businesses. The Hemi Phi 8 is returning to the Ram 1500. Order books surged 150% when the announcement was made. New product waves are arriving. There are early signs that the course correction is gaining traction. But the damage to Chrysler, Lancia, Maserati, and Alfa Romeo may be permanent. Customers who left do not always come back. Brand trust, once broken, takes a decade to rebuild. Maserati is on track to sell fewer than 10,000 vehicles in 2025, down from 26,689 just 2 years earlier. Chrysler still sells one model. The great-grandson of Walter Chrysler himself approached Stellantis management with an offer to buy the brand back. That is not a turnaround story. That is an obituary in progress. The lesson is not complex. You cannot sell a Dodge by explaining its platform efficiency. You cannot price a Jeep like a Mercedes and expect Jeep buyers to follow. You cannot remove a Hemi Phi 8 from a muscle car brand and replace it with a press release about emissions targets. People do not buy cars. They buy the feeling a brand has spent decades earning the right to sell them. Tavares believed he could engineer that feeling out of the equation. The market answered in the only language finance executives actually understand. €22 billion of losses, empty showrooms, and a dealer body that wrote letters begging the boardroom to stop. The boardroom kept going, until it could not. If you're watching this and you work in any consumer brand, in any industry where loyalty is the product, take a screenshot of those numbers and put it on your wall. That is what happens when the finance department runs the marketing department, and the marketing department starts to run the engineering department, and no one left in the building has ever loved what the company actually makes. If this video gave you something to think about, subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it. More stories like this are coming, and they are all connected.